Hello, I'm Masseur number 8. I lay on the hospital bed, tubes snaking out of my body and machines flickering in the sterile white room. I was a mess of bandages. My friend stood beside me, his voice heavy with disbelief. "You're a rank 8 half-step martial god," he muttered. "You really threw your life away to save a few dozen civilians? Was it worth it?" I forced a smile. Worth has nothing to do with it. I started my martial path too late. I pushed my body past its limits long ago. Rank 8 was my ceiling anyway. Besides, I'm a martial artist. Protecting the people is my duty. The heart monitor beeped feebly. My friend sighed, crossing his arms. "Stop acting tough. I know why you did it. Chen Yuding was in that crowd, wasn't she? You've met 1,000 beautiful women, yet you're still obsessed with her. I see you scrolling through those suggestive dance videos on your phone. You're not fooling anyone. I only watch those to identify succubus-type monsters disguised as humans," I countered weakly. "It's for public safety." "Get lost," he snapped. I went silent for a moment. My mind drifted back. Back in high school, my vitality test was 0.1. I was the bottom of the class. A total loser. I was ready to give up until I received that anonymous letter. It had a drawing of me as a future martial god. That silly, naive encouragement was the only light in my dark world. It gave me the confidence to fight, to struggle, and to eventually become who I am today. I knew Chen Yuding sent it. She was the only one in class who could draw. My friend looked confused. "A letter? Wait, did you get that after gym class one day?" I nodded. "You've got it all wrong," he said, his voice dropping. "I went back to the classroom for water that day. I saw Mingwa from the other class. She was the one who snuck in and put that paper in your desk. She died in a disaster a few days later. I always thought you moved on to Chen Yuding because Mingwa was gone." My heart skipped a beat. My body began to tremble. "No, that's impossible." I asked Yuding later. She told me she sent it. She lied to me. The monitor let out a long, flat tone. My vision blurred. My lifeline went flat. "Xiao Xian, wake up." A familiar voice shouted in my ear. Someone was shaking me violently. I felt groggy. I thought I was dead. Can't a guy get some rest in the afterlife? "Dad, stop shaking him. Let me try." Another voice said. "Hey, look, a beautiful girl in a black silk school uniform." I bolted upright, my eyes snapping open. I scanned the room like a hawk. Wooden training dummies, plum blossom poles, speed bags, a massive character for Marshall painted on the wall. Memories flooded back. I looked at the two men in front of me. "Third uncle? You're not blind yet? Second brother? You can still walk." They stared at me, annoyed. Without a word, they both grabbed my head and started rubbing my temples roughly until I begged for mercy. I started laughing like an idiot. This had to be a dream. Third uncle, Wang Dabiao, raised me like his own son after my parents died. His son, Wang Yin, was my brother in every way that mattered. In my past life, Uncle was blinded by enemies and my brother's legs were broken by corrupt elites while I was away fighting on alien planets. By the time I returned, it was too late to save them. "Take a break, kid," Uncle said, patting my shoulder. "I don't know why you're working so hard lately. You're a senior now. It's a bit late to start trying, isn't it?" I just grinned. I checked my phone. December 1st, 2024. I had actually regressed. I would never forget this day. This was the day an S-rank monster attacked our city, Rongqing. Thousands died. In my past life, I survived because I was training here at the gym. But Yi Mingwa died that day on Tianfu Street. She was shredded by the monster's shockwaves. I didn't know her well back then. She was the star of the school, way out of my league. I only had eyes for Chen Yuding because of that drawing. But if Yi Mingwa was the one who actually saved my soul with that letter. "Xiao Xian, I set you up in room 18. My brother said, pulling me toward the back of the gym. "We got a newcomer today. Go enjoy yourself." "Wait, I have things to do." I protested. "Nothing is more important than recovery," he insisted. Our gym had massage rooms. Some were for standard relaxation, others used martial energy to clear blood vessels. He pushed me into a dimly lit room and forced me onto a soft bed. I needed to leave. I needed to find Yi Mingwa before the attack started. I started to get up, but then the door clicked open. A faint, heavenly scent filled the air. A cold, clear voice spoke from the shadows. "Hello, I'm Masseur number 8. My heart stopped. I knew that voice. It was her. My hands are tired, she whispered. Is it okay if I use my feet? I searched for her 1,000 times in my memories, only to turn around and find her working as a technician in a massage parlor. I looked at Masseur number 8 and felt a twitch at the corner of my mouth. She wore the standard uniform, a deep purple short-sleeved shirt and loose trousers. Her hair was pulled back into a high ponytail, and a mask covered half her face. She wore thick, black-framed glasses on the bridge of her nose, hiding her eyes. In the dim light, with her head bowed, she was almost unrecognizable. I was certain that even our own classmates wouldn't realize this was Yi Mingyue, the cold, untouchable goddess of our school. But I knew. The moment I heard her voice, I knew. In my past life, I never would have caught it. She rarely spoke at school, and right now, her voice was low and trembling with nerves. But I wasn't just a high school kid anymore. I was a man who had once reached the level of a half-step martial god. My senses were sharp, even in this younger body. I could distinguish the wing-beat frequency of a female mosquito from a male at a glance. Compared to the complex roars of alien beasts I had fought for years, identifying a human voice was child's play. I studied her. I looked at the shape of her eyes, the width of her brow, her hairline, and her perfect proportions. When she saw me, I caught a flash of panic in her eyes. It was definitely her. Yi Mingyue walked to the bedside, pretending to look around, but her gaze lingered on me. She was trying to confirm who I was. Suddenly, she froze. Sorry, she whispered, setting down a bottle of nutrient cream. I think I'm in the wrong room. She turned to leave. My heart raced. Seeing her reaction, I was almost certain she was the one who had sent that letter in my past life. At school, everyone knew her, but she didn't bother knowing anyone else. We weren't even in the same class. If she was panicking now, it meant she recognized me. She reached for the door handle and let out a tiny sigh of relief. Nice disguise, Goddess Yi, I said, my voice dripping with mock casualness. The words hit her like a physical blow. She froze in place, paralyzed. Her body went rigid, and for a second, her loose trousers tightened, revealing the curves she tried so hard to hide. I took a moment to appreciate the view before I stood up. I walked past her and pushed the door shut. Click. I turned the lock. Yi Mingyue's eyes, which had been relatively calm, flooded with terror. The sound of the lock clicking made her entire body shudder. Her eyes widened, and I saw her panic turn into something closer to despair. I looked at the clock on the wall and stretched. Then, I pointed toward the bed. Do I really need to say what comes next? She stayed silent. She didn't move. It was a quiet, desperate protest. I didn't say another word. I took a step toward her. At 6'1", I towered over her, projecting the suffocating pressure of a predator. Yi Mingyue was barely 5'7". She looked like a cornered rabbit, backing away until her heels hit the edge of the bed. She had nowhere left to run. She pressed her back against the wall and crossed her arms over her chest, her eyes turning red. She looked like she was ready to die before she submitted. I glanced at her and scoffed. What's with that look? You're here to give me a massage, not the other way around. Where's your professional ethics? She blinked, stunned. She realized she had overreacted. Fumbling, she grabbed the bottle of nutrient cream like it was a lifeline. How long have you been doing this? I asked, testing her. It's my first time, she muttered, keeping her head down. I knew it. This had to be a part-time gig. My uncle's gym hired part-time masseurs and paid them well, but because the location was remote, not many people applied. Yi Mingyue probably chose this place because she thought she wouldn't run into anyone she knew. I still have my clothes on, I said, spreading my arms like a boss. What are you waiting for? Take them off. That's not part of the service, she whispered, her voice trembling. Oh, it isn't. I yawned. Maybe I should tell my uncle about your attitude. I'll do it, she blurted out. Her hands clenched into fists, her eyes flashing with a mix of shame and anger. After a few seconds of internal struggle, she stepped forward. She pulled my shirt off. The pants too, I commanded. She bit her lip, kneeling down. She turned her head away and closed her eyes, slowly pulling them down until I was left in just my boxers. I lay face down on the bed and closed my eyes. Apply the cream to the outer ankle, just below the bone, I instructed. I felt a cold sensation on my skin. It was Tianbao Nutrient Cream, a high-end product infused with martial energy. A bottle of this stuff cost at least 5,000 yuan. It was meant for real martial artists to strengthen their bones and muscles. A standard massage definitely didn't include this. My uncle must have set this aside specifically for me. Use more strength, I said lazily. About 70%. As soon as her hands touched me, I could tell she had potential. Her innate vitality was high, and her strength was impressive for her size. She was more than capable of doing this. Stop, stop, I barked. I said use your strength, not pinch me. If you don't have the technique, at least use your brain. You know the fitness boxing style, right? Use the third form, the horizontal phoenix eye. Put the pressure on your knuckles. Sink your shoulders and twist your waist. She was a quick learner. Following my instructions, she found the rhythm. Good. Next spot. 7 inches above the outer ankle. Use 50% strength. Use the 8th form of fitness boxing, the galloping leap. Stabilize your hips, or your elbow won't have enough power. I guided her through the movements for an hour. By the end, Yimingwe was gasping for air. Beads of sweat dotted her forehead. She didn't understand why a simple massage was more exhausting than a full workout. Finally, her hands started shaking. She couldn't take it anymore. She collapsed into a nearby chair, pulling off her mask and glasses. Her face was flushed a deep red, her usual icy demeanor replaced by a raw, exhausted beauty. Sweat rolled down her neck, disappearing into her collar. I opened my eyes and turned around. I stared at her for a moment, genuinely surprised. I hadn't realized she was hiding such a developed figure under those baggy clothes. Time's up, she said, wiping sweat from her brow as if she had just escaped a prison sentence. What's the rush? I checked the clock. I want to add another hour. Yi Mingwe stood up and took 2 steps back, her silence a clear refusal. My hands have no strength left, she whispered. Her hands were trembling slightly. It looked like she wasn't lying. I shook my head and looked Yi Mingwe up and down. My gaze settled on her long, straight legs. I couldn't help but smile. Your hands are tired? Well, you still have feet, don't you? Yi Mingwe froze. She didn't react at first. Then, following my gaze, she slowly looked down at her own toes. Her face turned bright red instantly, like someone had splashed red paint over her skin. She shook her head violently. Her voice turned as hard and cold as winter ice. No way. She refused me flatly. I just smiled. I understood. In the old days, a woman's feet were private, meant only for the person closest to her. Even in modern times, no decent person used their feet for a massage. I suggest you think it over, I said, lying back on the bed with my hands behind my head. This club belongs to my third uncle. Even if you're just a part-timer, your ID and student info are all on file. Ye great school beauty, you wouldn't want the whole school to find out tomorrow that you're working as a... I didn't even have to finish the sentence. The threat hit her like a physical blow. Yi Mingwe panicked. Wait, she gasped. She went through a visible internal struggle. Finally, she lowered her head and gently rolled up her pant legs. She revealed a section of calf as white as snow. It was stunning. Faint blue veins traced a path down to her instep. Just looking at them felt like looking at a rare piece of art. Come closer, I commanded. I thought for a moment. Put them on the bed. Let me see. Her eyes widened. I kept a straight face. Don't look at me like I'm some creep. I need to check for any odors. What if you're contagious? It's only logical, right? She stayed silent for a few seconds before finally placing her feet on the bed. I leaned in close, frowning with intense focus, inspecting them from every angle like a professional doctor. I even used my hand to fan the air toward my nose. Before she could tremble in shame, I spoke up. A bit sour, school beauty. Go wash them. She bolted. She practically flew into the bathroom to escape. I let out a soft whistle. I hadn't been joking about the inspection. I had noticed something incredible. 5 spirit lines on the soles of her feet. In the year 2040, people discovered that if someone awakened a high-level martial talent, their body would manifest these lines. The energy of heaven and earth would gather around that hidden power. Based on the clarity of those lines, she had at least a king-grade talent. I sighed. In the future, she was guaranteed to become a 7th realm grandmaster. Since 1912, humanity had shifted. Those with new martial talent were born with extraordinary power. They could unlock genetic locks and awaken supernatural skills. People like me, without that natural spark, had to rely on old martial arts. We had to train in the freezing cold and blistering heat, grinding our bones and blood just to survive. It was pure torture. New martial artists were the darlings of the era. In my past life, every martial god followed that path. Except for me. I was the only old martial practitioner to ever reach the 8th realm. Old martial arts weren't weak, they were just incredibly hard. Nobody wanted to suffer that much anymore. Even the massage she gave me earlier was actually a complex meridian opening technique from the old martial path. It was dangerous. One wrong move on a pressure point could kill a person. But with the energy from my high-end nutrition, the pain was 10 times worse than a fracture. Most people would scream. I just lay there and guided her. By now, 70% of students awakened some kind of talent. Old martial arts were being phased out. But a king-grade talent in a small city like Rongqing? That was a 1-in-a-million event. I never realized in my past life that this girl, who died so young, had such terrifying potential. A few minutes later, Manhwa walked out. She had regained her icy composure. She probably remembered what her trainer told her. Don't be afraid. Just treat the client like a piece of pork. If she had to use her feet, she'd just pretend she was stomping on meat. Wait, I said as she approached. I rummaged through the bedside drawer and grinned. I pulled something out and tossed it onto the bed. Put these on. She stared at the package. Her calm shattered instantly. It was a pair of brand new black silk stockings. She looked at me with eyes that could kill. Don't give me that look, I said righteously. I'm telling you to wear them for protection. Men and women shouldn't have direct skin contact, right? Besides, you don't want to touch a stranger's body with your bare feet, do you? You might be okay with it, but I'm a germaphobe. I paused and gave her a look. School beauty, you wouldn't want tomorrow. She stood there stunned, her mouth slightly open. She actually nodded. That makes sense. She took the stockings and went back into the bathroom. When she emerged, the sight was breathtaking. Those long legs wrapped in black silk were a masterpiece. The only pity was she wasn't wearing a skirt. I laid face down on the bed again, exposing my back. Same spots as before. This time, use this stance power technique. You've practiced it, right? A little, she replied. I'm not very good at it. I wasn't surprised. Stance work was the foundation of old martial arts. Even though the old ways were fading, schools still taught basic stances to help students improve their physical fitness before their awakening tests. This was going to be interesting. The new wave of martial arts was crashing down on us, but most students didn't take stance work seriously. They figured once they awakened their martial talent and gained supernatural powers, the basics wouldn't matter. They treated it like those generic fitness routines you see on TV. But I knew better. Whether it was the Hanyuan stance or the basic fist forms, these were the distilled essence of old martial arts, refined by the state over decades. They weren't simple. In my past life, I had practiced the Hanyuan stance every single day until I became a grandmaster. Later, I spent years researching it with other experts, discovering that when combined with specific breathing techniques, it could massively boost a martial artist's foundation and potential. It was a breakthrough that changed everything, eventually named the Hanyuan breathing method by the highest authorities. Of course, that wouldn't happen for another 60 years. I had died before I could ever see it become common knowledge. Stand up straight, I barked, glancing back at Manhwa. Stay steady. Get the form right. There are 3 rules to a good stance, and you're failing every single one of them. I gave her a look. Aren't you supposed to be a top student? Your stance is pathetic. If you can't even stand steady, how are you going to press down on me with your feet? Manhwa didn't argue. She didn't look defiant. She looked ashamed. To be fair, her stance was actually decent compared to other students. But to my eyes, it was full of holes. Drop your shoulders an inch, I commanded. If your hands feel weak, press your palms together against your sides. Open your feet a bit wider. They are like that. I kept pointing out her flaws. Dressed in those black silk stockings, Manhwa tightened her posture. Her body went taut like a bowstring. The loose pants she wore over the silk pulled tight, tracing the perfect curve of her legs. After a few minutes, I told her to lift one foot. She managed to keep her lower body steady, but her upper body lost its center. She started to wobble slightly. From my position on the bed, I saw her chest bobbing with the effort. You need more practice, I sighed. If this were a video game, your proficiency wouldn't even be 1%. You've been standing for less than 10 minutes, and your legs are already shaking. Yahello lowered her head, her ears turning bright red from the criticism. Fine. Listen closely, I said. Breathe the way I tell you. Focus your mind. Lead the breath. Move the energy through your body. Let it settle like a heavy weight. Then find the emptiness within the center. The Hunyuan breathing method was only about 100 words long. It sounded simple, but without someone to break it down, it was nearly impossible to master. I explained every word to her. She was smart. Within half an hour, she had grasped the basics. Her stance became visibly firmer, and even her aura seemed more composed. All right, that's enough for now, I said, yawning. I've taught you enough. Time for me to enjoy the results. She didn't waste the lesson. Yahello started the massage again, her expression incredibly serious. It was a strange sight, this elegant, studious girl in black silk stockings, performing a foot massage with the gravity of a brain surgeon. It was a mix of pure professionalism and something much more suggestive. As she worked, my mind wandered to Chun Yuding, that little green tea girl from school. I wondered what she'd be doing in this situation. I checked the time and saw how focused Yahello was. A wicked idea popped into my head. The next time she shifted her weight to press down, I gave my body a slight tilt. Her foot, slick with the expensive nutrient cream, lost its grip. Thud. She lost her balance and fell forward, landing right on my back. For a second, I felt like I'd been hit by a pair of soft, bouncy clouds. What do you think you're doing? I demanded, spinning around to face her. Yahello was panicked, her face flushed deep crimson. I told you this was a professional massage, I said, putting on my best indignant act. What's the meaning of this? Are you trying to seduce me? No, it's not like that, she stammered, waving her hands frantically. Then get off me. Are you trying to take advantage of me? She scrambled up, her eyes welling with tears of frustration and embarrassment. Time's up, she choked out. She pulled her feet back, clearly exhausted and ready to bolt. I stared at her as she turned to leave. She felt my gaze and instinctively covered her backside with her hands, looking like she never wanted to come back to this job again. You think you can just leave? I asked. She froze. What else do you want? Her voice was low, trembling. I sat up, dressed myself, and pulled a card from my pocket. There's 30,000 yuan on here. She blinked, shaking her head. I don't want it. Relax, I'm not giving it to you for free, I laughed. I'm opening a membership. You come here every weekend. 1,000 yuan per session. Once you've done 30 sessions, the money is yours. You'll have earned it. I won't. Think carefully, I interrupted, casually opening the school forum on my phone. School beauty ye, you wouldn't want a certain story to be the top post on the school forum tomorrow, would you? She looked like her head was about to explode from the stress. She rubbed her forehead, trapped between anger and shame. That's too many sessions, she whispered. I flashed a wicked grin. Well, if you want to earn the money faster, there are other ways. I let my eyes wander up and down her body. I'll do the massage, she snapped. Good choice. Oh, and take this with you. I tossed the half-empty bottle of Tianbao nutrient cream at her. It's too fragrant for me. I'm not used to it. She frowned at the bottle. She knew it was expensive, very expensive, even without a price tag. The scent wasn't overpowering. It was a clean, natural fragrance. I don't need it, she said. You do. I countered, pointing at her legs. Your muscles are weak and your breath is short. If you don't use it, you'll be all soft and shaky next time. I don't want you falling on me again and taking advantage of my body. I'm giving it to you for my own sake. I walked toward the door. As I passed her, I tossed the bottle again. She caught it with one hand. Her other hand balled into a tight fist. She had no comeback. As I reached the exit, I felt something. It was like a sixth sense. I spun around suddenly. Yahello had her fist raised, mid-swing in the air behind my back. She froze, looking like a deer in headlights. What? You want to hit me? She pulled her hand back instantly, tucking her chin so low it almost touched her chest. No, I didn't. I almost burst out laughing. So the ice queen of the school was just a mask after all. At school, she was cold and untouchable, always wearing that stern, frozen expression. But here, she was just a girl trying to keep her head above water. Her cold and distant attitude at school was legendary. Even though she was beautiful and famous, she didn't have a single suitor or friend. She was like a lonely crescent moon hanging in a dark sky. I never expected to see her look so flustered. Just then, my second brother, Wang Yin, appeared at the door. Xiao Xian, that sweet little girl Chen Yuting is here for you again. I froze for a second. Memories started flooding back, scattered, messy fragments of a past life. Oh, tell her to wait. I called back. I turned to Yi Minghua. Go change into training gear. Meet me outside in a few minutes. She gave a small grunt of agreement. Even if I hadn't told her, she wouldn't have wanted her classmates seeing her in that revealing work outfit. Out in the main hall of the martial arts center, a girl with a high bun was laughing with her friends. This was Chen Yuting. In a bit, I'll have Wang Xian give us a private sparring session, she told them confidently. We only have 2 months before class streaming. We need to practice hard to get into the dance department next semester. She looked charming in her tight-fitting gym clothes. Her curves drew the eyes of almost every man in the room. Even the guys sparring on the mats stopped to stare. Isn't the private package expensive? One of her friends whispered. I heard they charge by the hour. Chen Yuting smiled, looking completely sure of herself. If I ask, Wang Xian will say yes. His uncle owns this place. Besides, we can use the equipment for free. No fees at all. Are you guys dating? The friends asked, exchanging looks. Don't talk nonsense, Chen Yuting said, waving a hand dismissively. We're just classmates who get along well. The two girls nodded like they understood. I see. I was wondering why someone of your status would come to this dusty old gym. You're really giving Wang Xian a lot of face just by being here. They started giggling. The equipment is actually pretty good, though. They even have a small gravity room. Look, is that the cup crashing hand technique? That's such an old-school basic. Does anyone even practice that anymore? Who cares about that stuff? The other replied. Once we awaken our martial talents and get real skills, it'll be way better than this junk. The regular students at the gym frowned when they heard that, but they didn't speak up. Most people here were those who hadn't awakened any special talent yet. I walked out into the hall. Chen Yuting saw me and gave me a faint, rewarding smile. Wang Xian, come over here and be my sparring partner. I stopped and looked at her. A bitter smile tugged at my lips. In my past life, I had been her simping dog for years, all through high school and college. I only woke up after she married into a wealthy family. After that, I spent decades in the brutal trenches of the alien battlefields. By the time I returned, Chen Yuting had used her charms to marry up multiple times. She ended up owning a multi-billion-dollar corporation protected by top-tier martial masters. She was a powerhouse. In terms of manipulating men, no woman in the country could match her. But that was then. This is now. Sparring, huh? Sure, I said. I turned to my brother, whose face had gone dark. Hey, brother, what are the rates for the sparring packages? Wang Yin blinked, looking shocked. He knew I usually gave this girl everything for free. Junior level is 500 an hour. Intermediate is 1,000. Senior level with an entry-level martial artist is 1,500. I nodded and looked at Chen Yuting. Go to the front desk and pay up. She stared at me, pointing a finger at herself in disbelief. You're charging me? Why wouldn't I? I glanced at her friends. And you too, don't touch the equipment. Only members can use those. Membership is 3,000 a month. Right, brother? Wang Yin let out a loud laugh. Since they're your classmates, let's give them a discount. 2,500. The two girls pulled their hands back, their faces turning bright red. They scurried over to Chen Yuting's side, looking at me with strange expressions. Wang Xian, do you think this is funny? Chen Yuting's face shifted from shock to cold rage. You were the one who begged me to come here. I asked you to come, but I never said it was free, I replied calmly. Besides, I already have a client. Even if you pay, you'll have to wait in line. She trembled with anger, a look of pure disdain crossing her face. Who else would hire you? You're a loser with a vitality level of 0.1. Honestly, if it wasn't for this gym, I wouldn't even look at you. I didn't argue. I just stepped aside. Behind me, Yi Minghua walked out, dressed in a simple white training uniform. The three girls froze. Their eyes went wide. Manhwa walked over, her face like unmelting ice. She didn't say a word, but her mere presence made Chen Yuting take a step back. Her two friends retreated even further. If Manhwa was the bright moon in the high sky, Chen Yuting was just a dim star. Without the moon, she looked bright. Next to it, she was nothing. The eyes of everyone in the gym shifted instantly from Chen Yuting to Manhwa. Chen Yuting gritted her teeth. She couldn't believe it. The untouchable ice queen of the school was here, with me. Maybe we should just go, one of the friends whispered, tugging at Chen Yuting's sleeve. Chen Yuting snapped her hand away. She looked at me, trying to play her last card. Fine, Wang Xian. Since you're being like this, don't bother bringing me breakfast anymore. I'll just let Li Zihong do it from now on. I clapped my hands together. It's a deal. Promise. I almost laughed out loud. I remembered how hard I had fought for the privilege of bringing her breakfast in the past. Was I really that pathetic back then? You. Chen Yuting was speechless. She took a few deep breaths and sneered. Fine. I didn't really want to be here anyway. I already had other plans. You're just a poser. She grabbed her friends and turned to leave. Wait. I called out. Chen Yuting's lips curled into a smug smirk. She didn't turn around, but her voice got louder. It's too late to beg. You forgot your jacket, I interrupted. This is a gym, not a dry cleaner. Her breath hitched. With a dark face, she stomped over to the rack, grabbed her jacket, and bolted out the door. Once they were gone, Wang Yin looked at me with pure amazement. He punched me lightly on the shoulder. Finally acting like a man, huh? He glanced toward Manhwa and lowered his voice. New target? I gotta warn you, this one is way out of your league. I looked at my brother, Wang Yin. He clearly didn't recognize Manhwa. To be fair, she looked completely different than she had as the masked, number 8, sparring partner from earlier. The clothes and the vibe were worlds apart. He just chuckled, didn't push for more details, and walked away. I turned back to Manhwa. She was standing there, her face frozen, looking incredibly tense. What are you still standing there for? I asked. Oh, she muttered, blinking as she started walking toward the sparring ring. Where are you going? I laughed. Didn't you say you wanted a sparring partner? She looked at me blankly. This girl was actually serious. She really thought we were going to train right now. Well, I teased, you've got to pay the fee first. Without a word, she turned around and actually headed toward the front desk to pay. I moved fast, grabbing her sleeve before she could take another step. Do you honestly think you have any energy left to train? Don't be silly. She paused, her cheeks flushing with embarrassment as she realized I was right. It's a bit late, she whispered. I should probably head back. I nodded and didn't say much. I just followed her out of the gym. We walked in silence for a while until we were clear of the building. Manhwa noticed I wasn't stopping and eventually turned around, her voice small. You don't have to walk me home. I gave her a look of pure amusement. Who said I was walking you home? I live this way too. We're just heading in the same direction. She opened her mouth to say something, then hesitated. She picked up her pace, and I matched it. We walked for about 20 minutes. When we reached the subway entrance, she couldn't take it anymore. She spun around and glared at me, her eyes practically screaming at me to stop following her. I stopped, but I wasn't looking at her. I was staring at the sky. The twilight was turning a muddy yellow, and my chest felt heavy. It's here, I whispered. A massive shadow suddenly swept over the city, blotting out the sun. It was so huge it felt like someone had pulled a black curtain across the world. People all around us stopped. What was that? Someone yelled. A beast? No way, nothing is that big. Maybe a plane? The airport is 100 kilometers away. That was way bigger than a plane. People started pulling out their phones, pointing and snapping pictures of the darkening sky. Then, the world seemed to freeze. A couple in the middle of a fight stayed frozen with their fingers pointed at each other. A businessman eating street food let a piece of boiling hot radish sit in his mouth without chewing. A guy scanning a bike QR code never hit the confirm button. It wasn't that time had stopped. It was fear. An S-class beast's spiritual domain was crushing them. For anyone below the 7th realm, the pressure was physical. For ordinary people, it was total paralysis. Then came the wind. A violent, screaming gale followed the shadow. High above, the city's defense shield flickered into life. a blue curtain of hexagonal energy tiles meant to protect us like a turtle shell. I knew what that thing was. The sky-rending falcon. An adult could weigh 200 tons and span 140 meters. It moved at Mach 10. A single feather falling from its wing could slice a skyscraper in half. Its feathers even acted as an electromagnetic jammer. I didn't feel the pressure. I just watched the shadow. The day has finally come, I muttered. S-class beasts are called city breakers for a reason. They can shrug off intercontinental missiles like they're nothing. Usually, it takes a 7th realm grandmaster to even stand a chance. The current city defenses were pathetic against it. In the alien battlefields decades from now, these things were just common mobs I'd kill by the dozen. But here, right now, it was a god of destruction. I remembered this event. A grandmaster happened to be in the city on business and killed the falcon shortly after it appeared. But even then, the official report said a few streets were leveled and 1,000 people died. I knew the truth. 1,000 was just a number the government used to keep people from panicking. It could mean 9,000. A massive explosion roared from the next street over. The sound snapped the crowd out of their trance, and panic set in instantly. People started screaming and running like a flock of terrified birds. Get down. I lunged for Manhwa, grabbing her and pulling her toward the inner wall of the subway entrance. The ground buckled. A violent tremor shook the earth, throwing dust and debris into the air. We waited, huddled against the wall, until the shaking stopped. When we finally crawled up from the dirt-covered ground, the air was filled with the sound of people gasping and sobbing. Manhwa looked across the street and covered her mouth, her eyes wide with horror. The city's energy shield had been punctured. The bustling commercial street just 20 meters away was gone. It was a wasteland of rubble. The silence was the worst part. The guardrail in the middle of the road was a border. On our side, chaos. On the other side, a graveyard. Several blood-red feathers were stuck in the ruins, glowing like cursed blades. Just the shockwave from those feathers falling had wiped out an entire block. Suddenly, the giant advertising screens on the nearby buildings flickered to life. Attention! This is the Rome City Security Bureau. An emergency state is in effect due to an S-class aerial attack. Residents of Tianfu and Hongqing districts proceed to the nearest air raid shelters immediately. Grandmaster by Hongtian has been deployed. Do not panic. The broadcast warned low-level martial artists to stay away from the disaster zone to avoid secondary injuries. People began to line up, moving toward the shelters in a dazed, orderly fashion. I checked on Manhwa. She was unhurt. I let out a breath of relief, but then a voice cut through the crowd. Look, over there. Someone's still alive in the ruins. I looked. High up on a crumbling third-floor balcony of a shopping mall, a small figure was curled into a ball. The balcony was a lonely island surrounded by fire and thick, black smoke. It looked like it could collapse at any second. It's a kid, someone shouted. The moving line of people stopped. Everyone was whispering, but nobody moved. Aren't there any third realm martial artists here? A man asked. The crowd went silent. Nobody stepped forward. Then, I heard a woman's voice near me. She was tugging at a muscular man's arm. Brother Xiong, aren't you going to try? You just have to jump over that rail and get to the balcony. It'll only take a second to grab the child. The man next to me looked at the metal railing separating the safe zone from the ruins. It was just a simple barrier, easy to hop over, but he didn't move. Everyone was staring at him. His face stiffened, and he frowned. Save him? How? The man snapped. We're ordinary citizens. We need to follow orders and stay in line. Going in there just causes trouble for the authorities. He pointed at the wreckage. That was an S-class beast. Even its fallen feathers carry a massive energy field and thick killing intent. If that energy seeps into your body, it rots your flesh and breaks your mind. Without professional armor or spiritual gear, you're dead. I'm not risking my life because some broadcast told me to. The woman beside him whispered, But, aren't you a third realm martial artist? He choked on his words for a second. My vitality is 989. It's not 1,000 yet. Technically, I'm not third realm. In this world, vitality was everything. 10 points made you first realm, 100 made you second, and 1,000 made you third. But you passed the third realm exam last month, the woman cried out, her eyes pleading. The man's face turned beet red. If I die, who takes care of you? Let's just go. The woman went silent. People in the crowd started nodding, trying to justify their own fear. They said he was right. They said going in was just making trouble. They said the professional rescue teams would be here in 30 minutes. But deep down, everyone knew the truth. A child trapped in that smoke wouldn't last 30 minutes. They wouldn't last 5. There were other martial artists in the crowd, too. That 1-meter-high railing was nothing to them physically. But the fear left behind by that S-class beast was a wall 1,000 feet high. Manhwa was gripping my sleeve, so hard her knuckles were white. She bit her lip, staring at the ruins. This was the street she walked every day to get home. If she had arrived just a few minutes earlier, she might have been the one under that rubble. Suddenly, I stepped out of the line. Manhwa's eyes widened. She grabbed my arm with both hands. Wang Xian, what are you doing? What does it look like? I asked, looking toward the mall. Don't be reckless. Her heart was racing. We can't help. I won't let you do something this stupid. This isn't like saving someone from drowning. Even the third realm experts are staying back. I gave her a confident smile. Don't worry. I know what I'm doing. She didn't let go. I didn't pull away. Instead, I looked her in the eyes and asked, Manhwa, tell me. Who am I? She looked confused. You're Wang Xian, a student from Rong City High School. I shook my head. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the folded drawing she had given me. I spread it out, pointing at the heroic figure she had sketched. I am the future martial god. She froze. Her grip loosened as she stared at the paper, her mind clearly spinning. The martial god protects humanity, I said softly, taking off my jacket. If I see someone in danger and run because I'm afraid, I'd be failing the person who drew this. How could I ever become a martial god then? Manhwa lowered her head, her cheeks flushing pink. I pressed the drawing into her hands. What? Why are you giving this to me? She stammered. Keep it safe for me, I said. Give it back when I return. I didn't wait for an answer. I turned and sprinted. With a single hand on the railing, I vaulted over it. In one motion, I crossed from safety into hell, jumping over the wall of fear that held everyone else back. I had saved Manhwa because I was Wang Xian. But I was saving this child because I was once the first half-step martial god in history. I felt the power stir within me. Star refining technique, activate. Look, someone's going in, a voice screamed from the crowd. Is he crazy? He's just a kid. Look at his uniform. He's a high schooler. The line stopped moving again. Some people watched with white knuckles, others looked away in shame, and some pulled out their phones to record. A few older men shook their heads. Foolish. He hasn't even awakened his talent yet. He's going to die. This is what happens when kids watch too many hero cartoons, someone sneered. He's just making it harder for the real rescuers. Enough, the muscular man from before roared, silencing the crowd. He glared at the people talking trash. You people aren't even as brave as a high school kid. What right do you have to talk? What right do you have? Someone yelled back. You're a third realm martial artist, and you're still standing here. I was afraid, the man admitted, staring the speaker down. But at least I don't insult others to hide my own cowardice. He looked toward the ruins. The first martial god, Zhou Tianlong, said a warrior can lack anything except the courage to face the world. He's still just going to his death, the person muttered. Is he? The man snapped. If every warrior in history was afraid to die, we would have been wiped out centuries ago. None of you would even be born. You don't deserve to be called martial artists. None of us here are half the man that boy is. He turned to the woman beside him. Li, take care of our son. Brother Xiong? You. He smiled gently. I have a secret. In the hallway, under the second floor of the shoe rack, there's a hidden compartment. There's a stack of cash inside a pair of old shoes. Make sure you take it out later. Otherwise, you'll never find it. He turned away and began walking toward the railing. His pace was steady. He wasn't the only one. One by one, inspired by a boy in a school uniform, others began to step out of the line. More figures stepped out from behind the safety of the railing, following my lead into the disaster zone. Among them was the muscular man. As soon as he crossed the line, a faint, flickering glow ignited around his body. It was origin power, the unmistakable mark of a third-realm martial artist. He took a sharp breath, sweat instantly beading on his forehead. The other martial artists who followed him felt it too. You don't realize how heavy the pressure is until you're inside. The source of that crushing weight was nothing more than a few stray feathers drifting in the dust in the distance. A thin, reddish mist was beginning to rise from the ruins. It was the sign of leaking baleful energy. Usually, when an alien beast invades, the area requires a long period of origin power restoration before humans can live there again. That's the only way to scrub away the lingering filth left by high-order monsters. The big man swallowed hard, nodding to the other Third Realm warriors around him. "Let's do what we can," he whispered, his voice grim. "We probably can't save anyone alive, but we can at least bring their bodies back in one piece." The others nodded. None of them believed a normal person could survive in this environment. "That kid from earlier, he ran in so fast," one muttered. "I don't see him anywhere. He's probably already down." "The energy leak is getting worse," another added, squinting through the haze. "My senses are failing. If only we had a spirit-type martial artist with us. Their mental strength could track a target even in this mess." They huddled together for support, inching forward through the rubble. Meanwhile, I was feeling incredible. I ran through the ruins with my eyes closed, letting the baleful energy wash over me. I didn't care about the toxicity. In fact, I felt a surge of excitement. It felt like I was back on the alien battlefields. I can't even put it into words. It was nostalgic. It felt like coming home. On the alien battlefields, there is no natural essence. There is only divine chi, a substance so thick it feels like syrup. That place is the main stage for the 10,000 races of the starry sky. S-class beasts are considered children's toys there. People here call this stuff baleful energy and fear it. They aren't entirely wrong. To a normal human or a low-level martial artist, this energy is pure poison. It's a higher form of cosmic energy called spirit bane. It's much harder to control than the natural energy found on Earth, and far more violent. Back in my previous life, I discovered that martial arts fueled by spirit bane were several times more powerful. If used for body tempering, the physical gains were exponential. That's why alien beasts are so terrifyingly strong. The only problem is that spirit bane carries the will of the beast it came from. It usually shreds a human's sanity. But I wasn't an ordinary martial artist. The lingering will of a hive king? I wouldn't even blink if the king itself stood in front of me. I thought it would take years of cultivation before I could start absorbing spirit bane again. I got lucky. Thanks to Yi Mingyue's massage earlier and my own technique of shifting acupoints, I had managed to force open my Yangwei meridian. Without an open meridian, you can't absorb energy. It just sits in your cells until you explode. But with one path open, I could finally trigger the starry sky body tempering art. I smirked and picked up my pace toward a third-floor balcony in the distance. I hadn't forgotten why I was here. I was here to save someone. I knew exactly where they were, but I sensed something slightly special about the survivor, so I slowed down just a bit. I decided to use the walk to cultivate, so I'd have enough strength for the rescue. The starry sky body tempering art was my life's work. I created it by merging decades of ancient martial arts knowledge with the brutal lessons I learned fighting alien races. If mastered, it turns the human body into a heavenly furnace, capable of swallowing stars and moons. Back then, I finished the technique too late to save myself. This time, the timing was perfect. The first step is using cosmic energy to fill the 12 standard meridians and the 8 extraordinary vessels, 20 paths in total. When they link up, they form the divine vein. Once you have that, your power is limitless. You are no longer bound by Earth's weak energy. You can swallow anything the universe throws at you. With every step I took, spirit bane surged up through the soles of my feet. It flowed through my acupoints, Jinmin, Yangjiao, Jianjing, Fengqi, all the way to my forehead. Spirit bane is destructive. As it hit each point, it felt like a hot iron searing through my veins, destroying the old pathways entirely. But as I breathed, I moved the energy according to my secret formula. I used that very same destructive force to rebuild the meridians into something new. This was the divine vein. It was a fusion of cosmic energy and flesh. The pain was beyond the human limit. If opening a regular meridian is like standing at death's door, creating a divine vein is like dancing in front of the Grim Reaper. Only I, the creator, had the experience to pull this off. Not bad, I muttered. The energy here is a bit thin, but it'll do. My movements became lighter. My breathing was rhythmic and deep. Unlike old-school martial arts that require specific poses, my technique allowed me to cultivate while walking, sitting, or even sleeping. Still not enough energy, I noted, looking around. My eyes landed on a few scattered feathers from the Hive King. Up close, they were massive, blood-red, diamond-shaped, and as big as a two-man broadsword. Without the beast's blood to sustain them, they had shrunk, but they were still packed with energy. I stepped onto a feather. Immediately, a massive, ghostly phantom of the Hive King appeared in the air, roaring at me. It was the residual will of the beast trying to crush my mind. I laughed. With a flick of my finger, I shattered the phantom. I ground the feather under my heel and pushed the starry sky body-tempering art to its limit. I drained every drop of spirit bane from it. A faint light flickered in my eyes, and a powerful aura began to circulate through my limbs. The Yangwei divine vein was complete. I clenched my fist, feeling the raw, explosive power vibrating under my skin. This was just the beginning. I felt the power surging through me. A single punch from me now packed over 1,000 pounds of force. My overall vitality sat at a 0.5, but in this world, vitality was just a baseline. It represented a martial artist's natural talent, something that could be raised with effort. The higher your starting point, the easier the climb. Take Manhwa, for example. Her vitality was also a 0.5, but her maximum striking force was only 500 pounds, and she could only consistently hit 400. She had plenty of room to grow. A standard martial artist with a vitality of 1.0 could hit a limit of 1,000 pounds. But me? I had a divine vein. Even with a 0.5 vitality, I could already shatter that 1,000-pound limit. In simple terms, at the same level of vitality, my power would always dwarf theirs. That was the raw, numerical charm of the divine veins and the spirit bane energy. I looked at the massive Hive King feather at my feet. Might as well put this trash to use. I hoisted the giant thing onto my shoulder. It was heavy, but I barely felt the weight. I sensed someone watching me and glanced back, but I didn't care enough to stop. I turned and headed toward the third-floor balcony of the nearby mall. Not far away, a man was clutching his chest, leaning against a crumbling wall. He looked like he'd seen a ghost. He was a rank 3 martial artist, and even he was struggling. In this disaster zone, the thick, toxic energy was suffocating. He had to project his internal force just to keep the corruption at bay, and he was already at his breaking point. Then there was me. I didn't have a shred of protective force around my body. I was walking through the carnage on pure physical strength alone, completely unfazed. He probably thought I was some hidden genius whose talent had awakened early, but even that wouldn't explain how I was standing. He watched as I stepped on that feather. To him, that thing was a source of pure nightmares, an S-grade beast's residual will that could turn a rank 3 martial artist into a mindless puppet in seconds. He told me later he heard the feather scream as I ground it under my heel. The sound alone made his head spin and filled his heart with dread. But I just kept grinding it, enjoying the sensation. To a man who had spent a decade studying martial arts, I was breaking every rule he knew. "Brother, we can't stay. We have to go," his teammates called out from the shadows. The man shivered. He felt a sudden chill, like a predator had just locked onto him. He realized I had spotted him. Even through the thick red mist, I had sensed his presence. He couldn't understand it. His vitality was nearly 1,000. Mine looked like that of a normal high schooler. How could I see him? Was my level higher than his? He didn't wait to find out. Terrified and confused, he turned and fled. I ignored him. I swung the massive feather like a giant fan, parting the wall of flames in front of me. I walked into the mall like a god stepping through fire. As I reached the 3rd floor, I heard a soft, hitching breath. I looked up and saw a little girl. She was tucked into a corner, her eyes wide and trembling as she stared at me. She wore a tattered princess dress and a sky-blue pendant around her neck. The jewelry was glowing, casting a faint blue barrier around her like a protective bubble. She looked like a lost forest sprite trapped in a swamp of blood and fire. I leaped up to the balcony and crouched down. I gave her a small, gentle smile. "Hey there, little one. Want me to take you out of here?" She didn't move. She just stared. I thought about her for a second. In my past life, So many people died in this disaster. Aside from Yi Mingyue, I wanted to save at least one more person this time. I waved my hand in front of her face, but she was catatonic. It made sense. This place was a literal hellscape, littered with corpses and ruins. I was used to it, but for a child, it was the end of the world. My eyes drifted to her necklace. It wasn't just a trinket, it was a high-level martial artifact. Based on the glow, it had a defense rating of at least 100,000 units. That made it a grade 5 piece of equipment, something incredibly rare in this era. Usually, you needed massive vitality just to activate something that powerful. But here it was, keeping her alive in the middle of a nightmare. I reached out my hand again. I didn't know who she was, but I wasn't leaving her behind. Usually, only a martial artist with a vitality of 100,000 can equip high-level gear. But what this little girl was wearing was different. It was an unrestricted protector, the kind of legendary equipment that has no level requirements. Even an ordinary person could use it. It was designed to trigger automatically the moment the wearer was attacked. Without it, there was no way she would have survived this long in such a hellish environment. Still, the glow was fading. These high-tech artifacts were incredibly vulnerable to the corrosive nature of spirit evil energy. It was a miracle the barrier had held this long against those feathers. "Are you from the rescue team?" the little girl suddenly asked. Her voice was crisp and clear. I blinked. She was still conscious and lucid. I gave her a small smile. "No, but I'm going to get you out of here." I turned around and crouched down, signaling for her to climb onto my back. She didn't move. Instead, she shook her head. "Big brother, can you hold me instead?" she asked. She looked about 7 or 8 years old, her expression dead serious. I paused. "Why should I hold you?" In fairy tales, when the prince saves the princess, he always carries her in his arms, she explained. I almost laughed. "I'm not a prince kid." "But you're my prince," she insisted. I was at a loss for words. Kids these days were something else. Where did she even learn to talk like that? She was barely old enough to go to school, and she was already trying to charm me. "Not happening," I said, waving her off. I didn't have time for games. I reached out, grabbed her by the back of her collar like a little kitten, and lifted her up. "We're going like this." She tilted her head, watching me. Surprisingly, she didn't get angry. "Big brother, do you have a girlfriend?" "Don't worry, if you hold me, I won't tell anyone you're harassing a young lady." I actually laughed this time. "You? A young lady? You're a child. You haven't even grown in yet." She seemed to sense what I was thinking. "Do you think I'm small?" "You're 7 or 8, I countered. "Of course you're small." She shook her head. "But you're at most 10 years older than me. Is 10 years really that much?" "That's a whole decade," I reminded her. She started counting on her fingers. "But if we both become martial artists, we can easily live to be 1 or 200. When you're 110 and I'm 100, the gap won't seem big at all." I stared at her. She actually had a point. But I still wasn't carrying her like a princess. She let out a long, dramatic sigh. "Fine. You can carry me on your back then. I'm not a cat or a dog. Being carried by my neck is hurting my self-esteem." "You've got a lot of opinions for someone I'm rescuing," I muttered. I set her down and crouched again. She smoothed out her little dress, tucked her hair behind her ears, and wrapped her arms tightly around my neck. I hooked my hands under her knees and leaped off the balcony. As we moved through the ruins, the blue light from her pendant enveloped us both. "Big brother, are you a martial artist?" she whispered. "Not yet." "If you aren't a martial artist or a rescuer, why did you come in here to save people?" She paused, then her voice took on a dreamy quality. "I know. You must be my future lover. You regretted losing me, so you reincarnated and came back in time specifically to save me, right?" "Stop reading web novels," I told her. "Then why did you come?" "No one else came for us." I felt a pang of sadness in her voice. "I can see the outside," she continued. "I see them all standing there. They didn't come because they couldn't," I explained simply. "They were afraid, or they weren't strong enough. I came because I wanted to. I wasn't afraid, and I knew I could make it. It's that simple." We kept talking as I navigated the wreckage. One question after another, she didn't stop. By the time we reached the perimeter, the big man I'd seen earlier was slumped against a railing, exhausted. The first wave of the official rescue team had arrived. A woman screamed and threw herself into the big man's arms, sobbing with relief. But the crowd hadn't dispersed. Hundreds of eyes were fixed on the fog. It had been 30 minutes since the disaster started. Reporters, special agents, and medical teams were everywhere. "Uncle, did you find them?" a cold, anxious voice asked. The big man looked up. It was Yi Mingwe. The other martial artists who had escaped were silent, unable to meet the hopeful eyes of the crowd. "I'm sorry," one of them whispered. "We didn't find anyone else." The air seemed to get heavy. Yi Mingwe clenched her fists, her face turning pale. She looked like she was about to collapse. Everyone knew what this meant. If even rank 3 martial artists barely made it out alive, what chance did a high school student and a little girl have? The big man stayed silent. He wanted to say that the kid might still be alive, but he didn't want to give them false hope. "I am Chung Wu, from the Tianfu District Security Bureau," a man in a blue uniform said, stepping forward. He looked at the battered martial artists with respect. "Don't blame yourselves. Anyone who enters a disaster zone like this is a hero. We'll take it from here." Internally, Chung Wu sighed. He knew the statistics. In an S-rank disaster zone, the survival rate for ordinary people was effectively 0. "Captain, we're picking up a life sign," someone shouted. "Someone is coming out." The crowd froze. Every eye turned toward the swirling red mist. A silhouette appeared, walking steadily through the haze. As I stepped out of the fog, the silence was shattered. The crowd erupted into a deafening roar of cheers. "He did it. I knew he could. Look, he saved the kid." The people who had called me suicidal earlier were now shouting my praises. The dark cloud of fear brought by the S-rank beast seemed to lift for a moment. Even the rank 3 martial artists stared at me in disbelief. The big man rubbed his eyes, making sure he wasn't hallucinating. He'd seen me in there, but seeing me walk out was different. Chung Wu, the captain, moved instantly. He spotted the glowing blue barrier, and his eyes widened. "Captain, is that a grade 5 artifact?" a team member radioed in. "I have eyes. I can see that." Chung Wu snapped, though his heart was racing. He signaled his men to hold back the reporters and the surging crowd. He walked up to me. I looked like a regular high school kid, handsome, calm, and completely unfazed. "Young man, are you all right?" Chung Wu asked. I nodded and started to set the little girl down. But she tightened her grip around my neck, refusing to let go. "Big brother, are you abandoning me the second we're safe?" she pouted. I sighed. "We're safe now. Let go. I wanted to go home." "I need to go," the little girl whispered, her voice weak and trembling. She didn't look like she wanted to let go. In fact, she squeezed my neck even tighter. The medical staff rushed over to take her, but things got awkward fast. They didn't want to force her, but she wasn't moving. I didn't have time for a stalemate. I reached back, intending to grab her by the scruff of the neck and lift her off me like a stubborn kitten. "Don't," she squeaked. Her reflexes kicked in. She let go immediately and hopped down from my back, looking indignant. "Big brother, can you not do that?" She clearly didn't want to be carried around like a puppy in front of all these people. I just waved my hand. "Bye-bye." I turned to leave, but Chung Wu cleared his throat, stopping me. "Young man, you just came out of a disaster zone. You should come with us for a medical checkup." He looked concerned. "The red mist contains malevolent energy. Even with grade 5 armor protecting you, there might be lingering effects." "No need," I said, shaking my head. I was literally using that malevolent energy to fuel my cultivation. If they ran a scan on me, they'd find things I didn't want to explain. It was better to stay under the radar. "Don't be in such a rush," Chung Wu insisted. "Come back to the bureau with us. Your bravery needs to be reported and rewarded. There's a bonus involved." In his eyes, this wasn't just bravery. It was a suicide mission. No ordinary person survives an S-rank zone. He didn't know that I knew about the girl's armor. To him, I had jumped into certain death to save a stranger. That kind of selflessness was rare in an era where most people only cared about martial arts for power and profit. He wanted to turn me into a hero, a role model for the city. I gave him a small smile. "I didn't do it for the money, and I'd prefer it if you didn't broadcast this." Chung Wu froze. Before he could argue, I pushed through the surrounding staff and headed for the exit. "Wait, what's your name?" he shouted after me. "Which martial arts high school are you from?" He wanted to know which school in Rongqing could produce a kid like this. I paused and looked back. Rongqing High School number 7. Grade 12, Class 4. Back row, by the window. Chungwoo blinked, then let out a short laugh. I told him I didn't want the fame, yet I gave him my exact location down to the seat number. Getting out wasn't going to be easy, though. The reporters were like a pack of starving wolves. Even with the police and special agents trying to hold them back, the crowd was surging. I felt a bit amused. I'd seen much bigger crowds than this in my past life. When a 7th-rank master reached their peak, world leaders and ancient families would travel across the globe just to offer their congratulations. Compared to that, a few local reporters were nothing. Suddenly, a man in a suit broke through the line. He lunged forward, shoving a microphone into my face before he even found his footing. "Little hero, what's your relationship with the girl? What drove you to risk your life? Weren't you afraid of dying?" I stopped for a second and glanced at him. "What did you call me?" The reporter blinked. "A little hero, of course." "No." I pushed the microphone away. "I'm not a hero." The reporter chuckled, thinking I was being modest. "If you aren't a hero, then who is?" I pointed to the special agents nearby, then to the paramedics, and finally to the rescue teams still diving into the red mist to stabilize the zone. "They are," I said simply. The reporter went silent. He had a dozen clickbait questions ready to go, but my answer killed them all. The crowd around us went quiet too. I didn't waste the opportunity. I grabbed Manhwa, who was still standing there in a daze, and ran. We bolted through the streets as the sun began to set, leaving the chaos behind. We didn't stop until we reached the next subway station. The orange glow of the sunset hit Manhwa's face, highlighting the faint, dried tear tracks on her cheeks. "Hey, classmate Yi," I said, leaning in with a grin. "Were you crying?" "No," she snapped, quickly turning away and stepping into the shadows to hide her face. I didn't tease her further. I held out my hand. "Give it back." "What?" She was still a bit flustered. "My jacket." She realized she was still clutching it tightly. She handed it over, along with the drawing she had held onto for me. Her face was turning a deep shade of red. I took the drawing and said something I never got to say in my previous life. "Thanks." It's nothing," she stammered, looking at her feet. "Was yours anyway." She seemed like she wanted to disappear. She turned and started walking toward her house, which was nearby. "Classmate Yi," I called out to her back. "Make sure you practice those moves I taught you." She stiffened but kept walking, picking up her pace. "Because if you haven't improved by our next massage session." She didn't let me finish. She broke into a full sprint and vanished around the corner, leaving nothing but a lingering sense of embarrassment in the air. Over at the Rongqing Safety Bureau, the atmosphere was a lot more tense. "You wanted her to die of a cold?" a woman's voice screamed, echoing through the halls. Chungwoo had just walked in and flinched at the volume. He frowned, wondering who had the guts to scream at a grandmaster like that. Today, if it wasn't for Grandmaster Bai Hantian, the whole city might have been wiped out. He noticed his colleagues were all looking at the floor, pretending to be busy. He peeked into the break room and saw the man himself, Bai Hantian. The 7th-rank Grandmaster was covered in wounds from the S-rank beast, his face flushed with frustration. "I had to kill that beast first," Bai Hantian roared back. "Don't give me that," the woman interrupted. She was beautiful, but her face was twisted with rage. "I'm asking you why you didn't save your daughter first." Chungwoo realized this was Bai Hongtian's wife. "If I had gone for Xiaoxi first, even for a few seconds, thousands of people would have died," Bai Hongtian said, his voice dropping. "I am a 7th-rank Grandmaster. My duty is to the country and its people." It was a noble sentiment, but his wife wasn't having it. "You can't even protect your own daughter. What good is protecting the country?" She kept berating him, and the powerful warrior just stood there, his face a mask of grief and silence. Chungwoo couldn't take it anymore. He stepped into the room. "Grandmaster Bai," he announced loudly, "I have some good news." The next morning, I stood at the gates of Rongqing High School No. 7. I had my bag over one shoulder and breakfast in my hand, staring at the gold lettering on the sign. The memories hit me hard. The familiar buildings, the training grounds, the cafeteria, it felt like looking at an old, faded painting. In my last life, 60 years had passed since I stood here. Now I was back. Suddenly, a sharp shout came from the side. "Hey, you! Students aren't allowed to climb the buildings." I turned my head. Not far away, a fairly handsome guy was jumping. With a single leap, he cleared several meters, soaring through the air with ease. He leaped up, landing effortlessly on the second-floor corridor nearly 5 meters above the ground. He turned back, glancing down at the courtyard with a casual smirk. "Teacher, I'm just doing my rounds," he said. The patrolling teacher looked up, his stern face immediately softening when he saw who it was. "Xia Siken, just be careful." The students walking by started whispering, their voices thick with envy and annoyance. "Look at this guy, showing off again. If your vitality score grew from 0.6 to 1.2 in a single semester, you'd show off too," another replied. "His vitality has already broken past 1.0, and he's that handsome. With that kind of talent, he'll get into a top-tier martial arts university no matter what ability he awakens." "I have him on WeChat," a third student added. "He spent all day yesterday playing Martial Arts Infinite. He won several solo Shura matches in a row. The guy is a monster." I glanced up, the name Xia Siken ringing a bell. In high school, he was the ultimate golden boy, the kind of genius who never seemed to study, played video games all night, and still crushed every exam. Back then, I used to be incredibly jealous of him. But in my past life, I saw too many geniuses. Eventually, even someone like Xia Siken, who would later awaken a high-level talent called Iron Bones, faded into the crowd of mediocrity. If I remembered correctly, he ended up as a teacher at a decent university. Nothing more. I shook my head and walked into the teaching building. When I reached class 9, I paused. This was Yi Mingyue's class. It was barely 6 in the morning. The classroom was small, with only 40 desks. Yi Mingyue was already there, sitting right in the center of the front row, the throne reserved for the top student. She wore an old-school uniform that had been washed so many times it was turning white. Her eyes were closed, her lips moving silently as she memorized her lessons. I frowned slightly, looking around the empty room. Then, I walked straight in and tapped on her desk. "Morning, teacher," she blurted out, her eyes snapping open. When she saw it was me, she froze. "You look energetic, classmate Yi," I said with a smile. "Had breakfast yet?" "I ate," she said quickly. "Where?" "The school cafeteria." "What did you have?" She hesitated for a second. "Noodles." "What kind of noodles?" "Beef noodles." "Stop lying," I said, cutting her off. "The cafeteria doesn't sell beef noodles on Monday mornings." I set the bag I was carrying onto her desk. The scent of fresh food immediately filled the air. "You didn't eat anything. Take it." "I don't want it," she said, shaking her head. "You should eat it before anyone else gets here," I told her, ignoring her protest. "Otherwise, I can't guarantee what stories might show up on the school forums today." I didn't wait for an answer. I turned and walked out before she could even stand up. Behind me, Yi Mingyue looked down at the breakfast with a worried expression. It was a warm pancake stuffed with 2 juicy meat patties and a cup of hot milk, exactly what a student needed for a long day of training. After a moment, she glanced left and right to make sure the coast was clear. Then, she picked up the pancake and took a huge, guilty bite, her cheeks puffing out like a squirrel. When I got back to class 4, a few people were already there. "Holy crap, is the sun rising from the west today? You're actually early." A guy with a face that was somehow both ugly and handsome at the same time leaned over, looking shocked. This was Zhou Shuquan, my best friend from high school. He was a top student in the liberal arts and the backbone of our class. In my previous life, he was the only one who stayed by my side until the very end. "I was just bored," I said, shrugging. "Where's the breakfast you usually bring for Qinyuting?" he asked. "Gave it away." "To who?" "Yi Mingyue, from class 9. Zhou Shuquan gaped at me. Then he started laughing. "You gave it to the Ice Queen? What's the plan? You trying to get the food cold enough to give Qinyuting a stomach ache?" We traded insults for a few minutes until the classroom started filling up. Suddenly, a girl walked in, drawing the eyes of every boy in the room. Qinyuting was wearing the standard school uniform, but she had altered it to be tight-fitting, showing off her curves. She scanned the room, her eyes landing on me for a split second. She let out a cold snort and walked past me to the 3rd row without a word. Following right behind her was a tall guy with a face full of acne. He looked like a proud general who had just won a war. "Ting, I brought you breakfast," he said, puffing out his chest and shooting me a smug look. "Thanks, class president," Qinyuting said, giving him a small, sweet smile as she took the bag. Whoa, Zhou Shukuan whispered, leaning in. Looks like Li Zihong just stole your spot as her favorite dog. You used to be the one bringing her food every day. Why would a human fight a dog for a spot? I said casually, then leaned back and closed my eyes. Zhou Shukuan blinked. From the corner of my eye, I saw Chen Yuding glance back at me. When she saw my indifferent expression, her brow furrowed. She was clearly annoyed. I knew what she was thinking. Keep acting. Let's see how long you can hold out. At 7 o'clock, the school speakers crackled to life. It was time for the morning martial arts drills. We all filed out to the playground to practice the bodybuilding fist, a national standard technique. For most students, it was just a way to stay fit. But in the right hands, it was a lethal art. Most people never reached its true potential because they lacked the raw power to unlock its higher forms. Each class had a leader, the student with the best technique. For Class 4, it was Li Zihong. For Class 9, it was a girl I didn't recognize. At the very front stood the dean, Zhou Dahai. He was a sturdy man with a serious face. First move. Wind rises over Kunlun, he roared. The playground went silent as thousands of students moved in unison. I watched the dean's movements. To my eyes, his level was proficient. In another decade, he might reach mastery. For a rank 3 martial artist, that was respectable. Most people stopped practicing the basic fist once they reached rank 1, focusing instead on their specific talents. I wasn't interested in watching him, though. My eyes drifted toward the Class 9 formation, searching for a specific figure. I watched the Class 9 formation with great interest. Because we were lined up by height, and I was easily the tallest in Class 4, I stood out like a hawk in a field of sparrows. Every time I turned my head to look, it was obvious. Wang Xian, pay attention, Li Zihong snapped. As the class leader, he never missed a chance to lecture me. He used a turning move in the form to spin around and glare at me. Your technique is trash, yet you're still looking around, he hissed. You're ruining our class image. Watch out, or old man Chui will catch you. I didn't bother replying. Even though I was looking away, my body moved perfectly in sync with the dean's instructions. It looked effortless, almost careless, but I wasn't missing a beat. I wasn't affecting the class formation at all. I knew Li Zihong couldn't see the truth. He didn't have the vision to realize that my bodybuilding fist had already reached the level of transcendence. Even the dean on stage probably wouldn't recognize it. They simply lacked the perspective. Just focus on yourself, I said calmly. Li Zihong's brow furrowed. He let out a cold snort. Fine. Here's some news for you. There's a martial arts assessment today. Keep slacking off during drills and see if Old Man Chui doesn't skin you alive. Old Man Chui was our homeroom teacher, Chui Sanyan. We called him Three-Eyed Chui because he had a habit of lurking outside the back door window, making us feel like there was a third eye constantly watching our every move. I ignored the threat. My eyes drifted back to Yi Minghua in Class 9. I nodded slightly to myself. She was actually doing it. The primordial breathing method I taught her wasn't just for standing meditation. It could be integrated into the bodybuilding fist. One look at her told me she had taken my massaging advice to heart. She was incredibly focused, her movements sharp and disciplined. She didn't even notice me watching. Up on the stage, Dean Zhou Dahai was in his zone. He was in his early 40s, a veteran from the military who had practiced this basic fist for 20 years. He knew exactly how important this foundation was for high schoolers. As he led the drills, his eyes scanned the crowd, evaluating the top students. Zhao Jun from Class 8 is improving fast, he thought. He's almost at the small success stage. In the world of martial arts, whether old or new, techniques were divided into 4 realms: initial entry, small success, proficient, and mastery. Some called them stage 1 through 4. Beyond that lay the legendary realm of transcendence, where even the simplest move could shatter mountains. Guyu from Class 3 hasn't moved an inch in 2 years, the dean noted. Li Zihong from Class 4 has talent, but too many distractions. Xia Sikin from Class 1 is the real deal. He hit small success recently. He nodded with satisfaction. The bodybuilding fist was easy to learn, but notoriously hard to master. Reaching small success was a massive hurdle. Reaching proficiency took a decade of grinding. As for mastery, even some rank 7 grandmasters couldn't achieve that with a basic technique. Out of thousands of seniors, only Xia Sikin had reached small success. Suddenly, the dean's eyes locked onto Class 9. His expression shifted to shock. Wait, Yimingwe? When did she hit small success? He remembered her being just above average. She should have needed another year, maybe until university, to reach that level. She was a top student in academics, but this was different. The way she moved now was so fluid it started to subtly draw in the surrounding essence of heaven and earth. Did she have an epiphany? He smiled. That must be it. Little did he know, Yimingwe wasn't thinking about the fist at all. She was replaying the sensation of my massage from the day before. The dean continued his scan, feeling proud. Then, his body suddenly jerked. He was mid-move, transitioning into the 9th form, but he froze. Wait, that student, why can't I read his level? He stared intensely at a figure in Class 4. At first glance, the boy's movements were plain, even boring. He looked just like everyone else. But as the dean watched closer, his breath hitched. He realized that the students surrounding this boy were being subtly influenced. Their movements were beginning to sync up with his rhythm, as if they were being pulled into a tide. The air didn't ripple with energy, but the atmosphere felt heavy. A martial field? The dean's heart hammered against his ribs. A martial field only appeared when a technique reached the pinnacle of mastery and was performed by a grandmaster. In that field, even untalented students would suddenly get it. Top universities paid a fortune to have grandmasters perform just to give their students that edge. No, impossible. I must be seeing things, the dean told himself. He recognized the student now. Wang Xian, the kid with a vitality score of 0.1. There was no way a loser like him could manifest a martial field. He rubbed his eyes. Looking again, Wang Xian seemed ordinary. Some of his movements even looked a bit non-standard, but they were so smooth that the dean couldn't find a single flaw to criticize. It wasn't initial entry. It didn't look like small success because there was no energy ripple. Return to simplicity. It wasn't proficiency either. The dean himself was at that level, and his moves created audible sonic booms. As for mastery, the dean had seen it once. A master of the basic fist made it look like the entire world vanished, leaving only a singular, profound mystery. What he saw in Wang Xian was something else entirely. It was a level of calm that defied explanation. I'll see how long you can keep up this act, the dean thought, his eyes never leaving me. I watched the dean rub his eyes. He looked confused, like he couldn't decide if I was a genius or just making things up as I went along. He probably thought I was just messing with the forms, but the longer he watched, the more he got sucked in. I could see the ridiculous thought forming in his mind. Was this return to simplicity? He shook his head immediately. No way. Even if a student practiced body-refining fist from the womb, they couldn't reach that level with a basic martial art that combined so many ancient essences. The session ended before he could figure it out. I let out a long, slow breath, feeling incredibly refreshed. Around me, the students from Class 4 were whispering. Man, why did that feel so smooth today? One asked. Right? I felt it too. Did the teacher get better? I wasn't even looking at the teacher. I think my proficiency just finally leveled up. I didn't correct them. Most people don't realize that body-refining fist is more than just a warm-up. If you do it in the morning, you're energized all day. If you do it before bed, you sleep like a log. But you need to reach the mastery stage to feel those effects. That's why top universities use it as a graduation requirement. If an ordinary person practiced this perfectly for a lifetime, they'd live to 100 without ever getting sick. By 7:30, the morning drills were over, and it was time for regular classes. Foreign language class next. Score, my friend Josu Kuan said, his eyes practically glowing as we headed back to the classroom. Our teacher, Su Wei, was a stunning woman in her early 30s with wavy hair. Even in her dark professional suits, she was the reason half the guys in school actually showed up for language credits. I remembered Kuan's future. The dog actually ended up marrying his university professor, a divorced woman 10 years older than him. The guy definitely had a type. But the light in Kuan's eyes died the moment a bald head popped into the doorway. Your language teacher is sick, the man barked. It was the dean, known to us as Old Shui or Three Eyes, because of his piercing gaze. Everyone to the martial field. We're doing 3 consecutive periods of testing. Move. The classroom erupted in groans. Language class was a vacation, The martial field was a torture chamber. Testing meant physical endurance and memory drills, and old Shui was a tyrant. How many times has Teacher Sue been sick this month? Ku sighed. We stood up and joined the crowd. I know the liberal arts only count for 30% of our grade, but this is overkill. We walked out to the martial field, a massive area the size of several football pitches. It was packed. Different classes occupied different zones to avoid clashing. Hey, Class 9 is here too, Kuin said, nudging my shoulder. Maybe this won't be so bad. Look, the Ice Queen is here. Class 9 was famous for having the highest concentration of pretty girls, but Yi Mingyue was in a league of her own. She was wearing a tight-fitting training suit with her hair pulled back in a ponytail. Even in simple gear, she looked incredible, calm, cold, and perfect. I felt her eyes on me for a second before she quickly looked away. She knew I'd seen her. What are you looking at? Old Shui roared. 3 minutes. Get to the locker rooms and change. The guys bolted like they'd been injected with adrenaline. I was heading for the door when a familiar voice stopped me. Wang Xian. I turned. It was Qin Yuting. She was holding her training gear, her chin tilted up with that same old pride. With your usual scores, you'll probably only last 2 or 3 minutes in the stance test, she said. When you're done, go buy me some water. Bring a few extra bottles, and I'll forgive you for earlier. I didn't even slow down. You have hands and feet. Get it yourself. I don't have time for your errands. I turned to walk away, but she stepped in front of me, her eyes flashing. You're so petty. You only gave up on bringing me breakfast for what a day? If a girl is too easy to catch, you won't cherish her. Don't you get that? I stopped and looked at her. She was really doing this right now. Your grades are terrible, she continued, pointing a finger at me like she was disappointed. Even if I said yes, could you even get into the same university as me? We'd just break up. They say martial arts is about persistence, but you can't even persist in liking a girl. No wonder you haven't improved in 2 years. You're just playing hard to get now. It's pathetic. I actually started clapping. I couldn't help it. In my past life, this woman used her charm to manipulate wealthy families and eventually built a business empire. She was a world-class manipulator, and I was seeing the early stages of it right now. You're amazing, I said. Truly. She huffed and pulled out a 100 yuan bill. Look, if you're worried about the money here, just take it. At least pretend to keep trying. I don't want you to finish high school without having stuck to a single thing in your life. I stared at the money. This was weird. The Qin Yuting I knew was a parasite, not a saint. Was she actually trying to help me stay her follower? I'm not interested, I said after a few seconds. Find someone else to buy your water. I walked into the locker room, leaving her standing there, her face turning bright red with rage. 3 minutes later, we were all lined up on the field. Old Shui checked his watch. I won't repeat the rules. Standard stance. 20 minutes for a pass. 34 excellent. 40 minutes for a full score. The crowd went silent. Teacher. Li Zihang raised his hand. Wasn't 20 minutes the full score before? Old Shui narrowed his eyes. That was before. You have 1 month until the martial arts class trials. This is the new standard. If you want into the elite class, you'd better get used to it. The elite class. That was the goal. It was where the school dumped all its resources, cut out the boring lectures, and focused purely on turning students into monsters. In this world, that class was the only ticket to a real future. Getting into the martial arts class was the only thing that mattered. It meant a guaranteed spot at a first-rate martial arts university or even a direct recommendation. But spots were tight. In our high school, there were nearly 20 senior classes, but they only selected 50 students total. That meant maybe 2 people per class. Every student in the city dreamed of getting in. Enough talk, Old Shui barked. Stance training. Now. We looked at each other and shuffled into our positions. Remember, Old Shui said, his voice cold. Stand tall. Stand firm. Stand right. He stood there, expressionless, demonstrating the form. Shoulders dropped, elbows hanging, head held as if suspended by a string. He looked like a boulder, unshakable. Not a single muscle moves, he warned. If you shift, you lose balance. If you lose balance, the power won't reach the ground, and your time won't count. He began to pace, his eyes scanning us like a hawk. Within 3 minutes, legs started to tremble. The weighted blocks balanced on a girl's head and shoulders hit the floor. 3 minutes and 52 seconds, old Chui said, frowning at her. Yuan Xian, I know you're planning on the academic track, not martial arts. But even for the academic exam, you need a vitality score of 0.5. You started at 0.2 and only crawled up to 0.38 in 2 years. If you don't build your foundation through the stance, you won't pass. I'll try harder, teacher, Yuan Xian whispered. She walked to the side, drenched in sweat and pale as a ghost. She glanced back at the group and muttered, That's weird. Usually, Wang Xian is the first one to collapse. Old Chui overheard her and blinked. His gaze shifted toward me. I saw his eyebrows shoot up in surprise. I stood there, perfectly still. I felt like a statue carved from stone. Every joint was aligned with mathematical precision. Even my gaze was fixed, merging with the world around me. Nobody could move me. A perfect Hunyuan stance, old Chui thought. I could see the shock in his eyes. My form was textbook perfect, maybe better. He checked his watch, wondering how long I could actually hold it. Time ticked by. One by one, students dropped. The 10-minute mark was a wall. Half the class went down. Chen Yuting couldn't help herself. She used her peripheral vision to sneak a peek at me. I saw the impossible look written all over her face. Chen Yuting. Focus. Old Chui snapped. In this stance, a split second of distraction is enough to ruin everything. The students who had already failed sat on the grass, watching us with envy. They wanted to whisper, but old Chui's presence kept them silent. At 20 minutes, half of the remaining group collapsed. Only about a dozen of us were left. At 30 minutes, it became a war of will. The weights on my head, shoulders, arms, and legs, totaling over 100 pounds, felt like a mountain pressing down on me. By 35 minutes, only 5 people were still standing. Chen Yuting, Zhou Su Kuan, Li Zihang, the class rep Long Biao, and me. 36 minutes. Zhou Su Kuan hit the dirt. 37 minutes. Long Biao went down. 38 minutes. Li Zihang collapsed. Now, every eye in the class was on the last 2 people standing. Specifically, they were staring at me. Zhou Su Kuan was lying on the ground, too exhausted to even think straight. Since when did my bro get this strong? You're acting like a stranger, man. Li Zihang looked even worse. His face was twisted with resentment, though he was so pale from exhaustion that it was hard to tell. He stared at me like he was having a nightmare. Even with old Chui standing there, the whispers started. Since when is Wang Xian this good? His vitality is 0.1. I heard he hasn't even hit 0.2 in 2 years. He's a slacker. He used to last 3 minutes. Now he's hitting 40. Is he possessed? Chen Yuting said his family runs a gym. Maybe he knows some pro secrets. Old Chui didn't stop them. He was too busy staring at me. To the other students, Chen Yuting and I looked like we were evenly matched. But old Chui knew better. He could see she was at her absolute limit, while I was barely breaking a sweat. The timer hit 40 minutes. Old Chui clicked it off. Time. The second he spoke, Chen Yuting crumpled. The weights fell off her body with a series of loud metallic clangs. She didn't have the strength to stand, so she just sat there, staring up at me in pure shock. I didn't collapse. I smoothly transitioned out of the stance, flicked the weights up into the air with a slight shrug, and caught them effortlessly in my hands. It was slow, deliberate, and easy. Chen Yuting, full score, old Chui announced. He paused, looking at me. Wang Xian, full score. The class exploded into chatter. They finally saw the difference. I could have kept going for hours. I glanced at Chen Yuting. She got 40 minutes because that was her limit. I got 40 minutes because that was the maximum score. 10-minute break, old Chui roared. Hydrate. Next is the memory assessment. He gave us one last look and walked toward the office. As soon as he was gone, the tension broke. Chen Yuting forced herself up and walked toward me. The shock in her eyes had curdled into disappointment. Wang Xian, is this really necessary? She asked. I grabbed my towel. What are you talking about now? You aren't even sweating, she said coldly. This is so fake. Did you take a stimulant? The crowd went silent. Li Zihang started laughing. Of course. That explains it. A 0.1 vitality score lasting 40 minutes? You definitely took a vitality booster. There's no way your body could handle a Hunyuan stance for that long otherwise. The others started nodding. I knew it was weird. A month ago, he was worse than Yuan Xin. Those drugs aren't cheap, right? Zhou Su Kuan frowned and tried to back me up. Shut up. It's just a class test. Who would waste money on drugs for this? Someone who wants to show off, Li Zihang sneered. But what's the point? You can't use those in the real exams. The side effects will wreck you. Quiet. Qin Yuting snapped at Li Zihang. She turned back to me, sighing like a disappointed mother. Wang Xian, the memory test is next. Drugs won't help you there. The teacher will see right through you the moment he starts. Come with me to find Teacher Cui and explain yourself. He might forgive you if you're honest. He probably left just to give you a chance to come clean before he has to punish you in front of everyone. She really thought she had me figured out. Stimulants were strictly banned by the school, but I didn't need drugs. I had decades of combat experience and a soul that had survived the alien battlefields. I wasn't here to impress her. I was here for the resources at the top universities, treasures I had missed out on in my last life. You don't have any proof, I said, slinging the towel over my shoulder. So unless you've got something better to do, stay out of my way. Those drugs cause permanent, irreversible damage to your body, Li Zihang added, his face twisting when he saw Qin Yuting still trying to help me. Li Zihang, shut up, Qin Yuting snapped. We're all classmates. As the class monitor, shouldn't you be concerned about your peers? Li Zihang's expression was a messy mix of attraction and frustration. He couldn't argue with her when she got like this. Fine, he muttered. She's right. Wang Xian, listen to her. I raised a hand to cut them off. Stop. I need to rest. Think whatever you want. I turned my back on them and walked toward the water dispenser. See? It's useless, Li Zihang said, shrugging. But Qin Yuting didn't give up. She followed me. Across the room, the students in Class 9 were buzzing with gossip. Is there any point in taking drugs for a small test? One girl whispered. I know some vitality boosters, but to jump that much? That must be some heavy-duty stuff. That Wang Xian guy is actually pretty handsome. How did I never notice him before? Don't be a fangirl. He's the famous loser from Class 4. It's a shame. Yi Minghua was sitting nearby. She had been quietly watching me during the stance training, but when the whispers reached her, she stood up. She looked at the gossiping girls with a face like ice. Stop spreading baseless rumors, she said. The girls froze. They felt the temperature in the room drop instantly. The technique assessment tests your comprehensive martial quality. Do not think you can fluke your way through this. Especially some of you. I walked over to the weapon rack. These were training tools, same weight and material as the real thing, just unsharpened. I looked at a long spear. It felt like looking at an old friend. In my past life, the spear was my partner. There's an old saying, a month to learn the pole, a year to learn the blade, but a lifetime to master the spear. Among the three main weapons, saber, sword, and spear, the spear is the hardest. It was the king of the ancient battlefields. To truly master it, you need to survive 1,000 slaughters. I chose the spear in my last life because I knew I was headed for the alien battlefields. Decades of killing had pushed my spear technique to the 10th stage. Of course, with my current body, I couldn't perform at that level yet. Reaching that peak again would require the physical power I had in my prime. Besides the spear, I was an expert with flying daggers. I knew other weapons well enough to fight against them, but I hadn't mastered them. My eyes drifted to the swords and sabers. Most students chose the sword. It was the mainstream weapon because the first martial god of our country was a swordsman. Sabers were less common, and spears were rare, usually only picked by those planning to join the military. In this new life, I didn't want the spear. My mastery was already at the ceiling. There was no room to grow. I wanted to use this period of growth to master something new. With my combat experience, it wouldn't be hard. Besides, if I actually used a spear, I was afraid Teacher Cui wouldn't be able to handle it. I reached out and grabbed a Shochuan saber. It was a masterpiece of ancient design, refined by modern technology. Even unsharpened, the edge looked cold and dangerous. The sword is about spirit, but the saber is about the weapon itself, Teacher Cui said, appearing beside me. To master the saber, you must nurture its ferocity. You used fist blades in your first 2 years. Then you switched to the sword in your 3rd year. Why the saber now? I used fist blades because of my uncle's gym. I switched to the sword because I was busy being a lapdog for Qin Yuting. I just felt like it, I replied. The saber is like a tiger. The sword is like a phoenix, Chui warned. If you don't have a tiger in your heart, you can't master the blade. If you haven't practiced, don't use this for your assessment. I just shook my head. He didn't push further. Soon, everyone had their weapons and gathered around the arena. It was about the size of a basketball court, packed with high-tech sensors. It could track movements in milliseconds and calculate a technique score while simultaneously measuring vitality levels. Our school only had 3 of these setups. Are you serious? Zhou Su Kuan whispered, leaning in. He was fiddling with a short sword. You're really going up there with a saber? Yeah. Look, I want to believe you, he coughed, but 3 Eyes doesn't tolerate nonsense. If you go up there and can't even block one move, it's going to be embarrassing. You can't fake this. The sensors see everything. If I can't block it, I can't block it, I said calmly. I'll just work harder next time. In my mind, I was already running through countless saber forms. I had a good feeling about this. Zhou Su Kuan looked at me, confused. My words made sense, but the way I said them felt different. Teacher Chui leaped onto the stage. I will limit my vitality to match the exam standard, he shouted. Let's begin. The screen above the arena flickered to life. Chui Guoyang's stats popped up immediately. His vitality was set to exactly 1.0. As a rank 3 martial artist, he had to suppress his power significantly for a student assessment like this. Yuan Xian, you're first, old Chui said, gripping a long staff. Yuan Xian stepped up, clutching a longsword. The sensors scanned him instantly, vitality 0.39. Old Chui really knew his students. He had called that number earlier with perfect accuracy. Attack, old Chui commanded. He stood perfectly still. Yuan Xian hesitated for a few seconds before charging forward, swinging his blade. It was a decent move, but old Chui didn't even bother using his staff. He reached out and slapped the side of the blade with his bare hand. The impact sent Yuan Xian spinning. He lost his balance and went flying back. The gap was massive. Even with suppressed vitality, old Chui's technique was on another level. The screen flashed, sword technique score, 26. It was a bottom-tier score, barely entry-level. But since we were in the liberal arts track, old Chui didn't scold him. He just looked stern, making everyone break into a cold sweat. Next, your movements are soft. You can't even hold the sword steady. You have 0.3 vitality, but you can't even exert half of that power. Old Chui was relentless. He pointed out every flaw with surgical precision. I've told you 100 times, the saber is a weapon of power. You don't even have the courage to face your teacher, so why are you holding a blade? He kept shaking his head. Weapons are just extensions of our limbs, and these kids were barely past the beginner stage in basic boxing. Mastering a weapon was a distant dream for most of them. I could see a hint of loneliness in old Chui's eyes. He knew most of these students were just waiting to see if they'd get lucky and awaken a supernatural talent rather than putting in the hard work. Zhou Su Kuan went up next. He managed to block 2 moves, his shoulders aching from the impact. His score was an 82. In our class, that was top tier. Once you hit 100, you're officially at rank 1 proficiency. Li Zihang followed with a score in the 80s too. But still, nobody could last 3 moves against old Chui. Then, it was Chen Yuting's turn. The crowd went silent. Her vitality flashed on the screen, 1.0. People gasped. She was the only one in class who had reached the baseline for a true martial artist. Good, old Chui nodded. You've improved by 0.2 since last time. That's impressive. Chen Yuting held her sword in a perfect starting stance. The moment old Chui gave the signal, she blurred. She lunged forward like a spear. Coming at me, old Chui seemed surprised by her speed. They clashed. Clang, clang, clang. They traded 3 moves in the blink of an eye. On the 4th move, Chen Yuting did something unexpected. She threw her sword. The blade spun through the air in a lethal arc toward old Chui's shoulder. He didn't flinch. He swatted the flying sword away, but Chen Yuting was already in the air. She caught the rebounding hilt mid-flight, spun 360 degrees, and thrust downward. It was a beautiful, fluid motion that left half the class staring in awe. Old Chui acted like he had eyes in the back of his head. He flipped his staff into a reverse grip, blocked the strike, and gave a gentle flick. Chen Yuting was sent skidding back. She landed on her feet, using her sword to brace herself. Not bad, old Chui smiled. Your speed and technique are there, but your power is lacking. At 1.0 vitality, you should be able to hit with 1,000 pounds of force. You didn't even use a third of that. If you had more power, you could have lasted 10 more moves. The screen updated. Chen Yuting. Sword technique score, 99. The class erupted. She was 1 point away from rank 1, and we still had half a year before the exams. Now, I was the only one left. Because I was the last to fall during the stance training, I was the final assessment. Everyone was leaning in, ready to watch me fail. You can fake vitality with drugs, but you can't fake skill. The moment you step on that stage, the censors tell the truth. Li Ziheng looked like he was about to start mocking me, but Chen Yuting glared him into silence. Even the students from Class 9 were watching now. I noticed Yi Mingyu sitting high up in the bleachers. Her class was done, and she was resting. She looked lonely up there, but she didn't seem to mind. She was dabbing her forehead with a towel, but every time she moved it, I caught her peeking toward our arena. Chen Yuting saw her looking too. Her expression soured. What are you looking at? She seemed to think. You want to see him embarrass himself? Wang Xian, you're up, old Chui called out. I grabbed my saber and stepped onto the stage. There were only a few saber users in our class, and most were terrible. To use a saber, you need qi, an aura of dominance. Most students were too scared of the teacher to even find that spark. I stood on the platform for 3 seconds. The censors did their work. Vitality, 0.59. The room went quiet. My last test was 0.17. My natural talent was supposed to be trash. I had jumped 0.4 points in no time, a bigger leap than even Chen Yuting. He definitely took drugs, Li Ziheng blurted out, his voice cutting through the silence. There's no other way. Before the data hit the screen, everyone was just guessing. Now, the numbers were real. Zhou Su Kuan stood frozen, his mouth hanging open. He didn't want to believe it. Even if he took drugs to hit 0.6 vitality, Long Biao muttered, gripping his own blade. His technique will be trash. He won't last one move. Long Biao was one of the few saber users in class. He wasn't the best, but he knew how hard it was to find the right flow. The other students nodded in agreement. Skill took years. You couldn't swallow it in a pill. On the stage, old Chui didn't say a word. He just stood there, calm as a mountain. Attack, he commanded. I gripped my saber. With a sudden flick of my wrist, I tilted the blade. Even though it wasn't sharpened, the flat of the steel caught the light, sending a piercing flash across the room. Old Chui's heart skipped a beat. A saber is all about qi, the intent to dominate. That simple opening move had a weight to it that felt like a wild beast about to spring. A second later, I moved. I was a blur. Too fast, someone shouted. I was moving even faster than Chen Yuting. Old Chui's pupils contracted. He recognized it immediately. I wasn't just fast. I had reached the absolute limit of what 0.59 vitality could produce. Most people had fluctuations in their performance, but I was hitting the theoretical maximum. I didn't give him time to think. I brought the blade down in a standard vertical cleave. It was the most basic move in saber technique, but I executed it with everything I had. It felt like a tiger smashing a boulder. Old Chui's eyes widened. He raised his staff to block. Bang! The collision sent a shockwave through the air. The crowd gasped. Old Chui, who hadn't moved an inch all day, was forced back a full step by the sheer impact. He looked at me, his eyes flickering between excitement and shock. This wasn't drug-induced strength. This was the result of a foundation so solid it felt like it had been forged over decades. That single strike carried over 600 pounds of force. Good strike, Old Chui laughed. He swung his staff, using a circular motion to catch my blade and redirect the momentum. It was a classic disarming move. Most students would have lost their weapon right then. I expected it. Instead of fighting the pole, I let my toes graze the floor and spun with the momentum, transitioning into a horizontal slash. Old Chui's excitement grew. Interesting, he whispered. He wasn't just standing there anymore. He started to move, his footsteps tracing small, precise circles. He was using a high-level footwork technique, staying within a tiny space while parrying every strike I poured out like a waterfall. As we traded blows, My connection to the blade grew. In this life, I hadn't touched a saber until now, but my soul remembered the rhythm of war. With a master like Old Chui to push me, my talent was exploding. Real combat was the only way to truly learn. The gym fell into a deathly silence. Nobody dared to blink. We were moving so fast the sounds of wood hitting steel blurred into a single, continuous rhythm. Eventually, the gap in our stats started to show. My movement slowed. My lungs burned. Old Chui remained unchanged, even though he was suppressing his vitality to a level of 1.0. His movements were ghostly, shifting just enough to make my blades miss. After a dozen exchanges, we broke apart. I looked at the saber in my hand, silent. I felt something clicking into place. "That's enough," Old Chui said, sensing my exhaustion. He knew I only had one strike left in me. He was confident I couldn't break through his third-stage staff technique and his perfect footwork. I closed my eyes. I focused. Then, I tilted the blade one last time. Old Chui braced himself. He could feel the aura. Even at my limit, my intent hadn't wavered. He took a deep breath, ready for the final clash. I moved. But this time I wasn't fast. In fact, I looked slow. Even the students in the back thought they could dodge it. Old Chui frowned. Something felt wrong. When I was exactly 5 steps away, I lunged. I used the same vertical cleave from the beginning. But halfway through the arc, the slow movement transformed into a thunderous explosion of speed. It was a change of pace blade. Old Chui raised his staff, but the sudden burst caught him off balance. The impact was massive. He was forced back 5 full steps before he could stabilize himself. His wooden staff was actually bent from the pressure. He let out a burst of energy to shove me back and clear the space. I landed firmly on my feet. Without a word, I flicked my wrist, tossing the saber 20 meters across the room. It landed perfectly in the weapon rack. "I lose," I said simply, turning to walk off the stage. Behind me, the digital scoreboard flickered and then displayed a bright, 3-digit number. Wang Xian. Saber technique, 125. Rank, first stage. The gym erupted. People were losing their minds. 125 points. He's a first-stage master? Only one kid in the elite class has reached that. He pushed Old Chui back twice. How is that possible with 0.6 vitality? The accusations of cheating died instantly. You could buy drugs, but you couldn't buy a first-stage rank in saber technique. That required a level of mastery that most people wouldn't reach in years. Zhou Su Kuan was howling with laughter, pointing at Li Zihang. "What happened? I thought you said he was a fraud." Li Zihang's face was a deep shade of purple, half from embarrassment and half from genuine shock. Qin Yuting stood there, her eyes wide with a mix of awe and something else. As I walked past her, she stepped forward, her voice trembling slightly. "Wang Xian," she said softly. "I'm sorry." I paused for a second. Qin Yuting's eyes were sincere, and for the first time, she looked like she actually meant her apology. I just shook my head. It felt strange. Back in high school, she was never this mature or humble. Maybe it was because Yi Minghua was watching. "I have a question," she said softly. "Who did you learn your saber techniques from?" I didn't answer. No one in that room could have known the truth. I hadn't learned it from a teacher. In fact, from the moment I started trading blows with Old Chui, my skills had been evolving in real time. By the end of the fight, I had broken through the first stage threshold. I could feel the insights settling in my mind. If I went home and processed everything, I knew I could reach the second stage within days. With my memories from my past life, mastering weapons was like riding a bike. Qin Yuting didn't push for an answer when I stayed silent. She probably assumed I had a private tutor or studied at an elite outside dojo. Over in Class 9, the girls were whispering. "Wang Xian is actually kind of hot," one said. "I've seen Pang Sandao from Class 10 fight, and it's totally different. His style isn't this aggressive." They were right. Saber technique is all about momentum. If your spirit is weak, the blade is just a piece of metal. When Pang Sandao fought the teachers, he acted like a student, hesitant and respectful. But when I stepped onto that stage, I didn't see a teacher. I saw an enemy. "Even if he didn't take drugs, his stamina is insane," another student muttered. "Most of us can't even stand in a horse stance for 40 minutes. But he looks like he's just warming up." In a school where everyone wanted to look elegant with a sword, I had just given them a wake-up call. Swords were graceful, sure, but a saber was a mountain. It was heavy, dominant, and absolute. Yi Minghua watched me through the gaps in her towel as she wiped her face. Just like him, she whispered to herself. Dominant and unreasonable. All right, everyone, fall in, Old Chui shouted, waving his hand. He took a deep breath, looking at me with a complicated expression. He was a pro. He saw things the students missed. He knew my technique wasn't at the first stage when the fight started. I had broken through during that final strike. Before that, I had been surviving on raw power, speed, and perfect timing. He couldn't wrap his head around it. How could a slacker who had been failing for 2 years suddenly possess the combat instincts of a veteran? Most students would have crumbled after 3 moves. But I had pushed my 0.6 vitality to its absolute limit. Even professional martial artists struggled to exert 100% of their theoretical power, yet I had made it look easy. The truth was, I hadn't even reached my limit yet. With my godly meridians, I could output over 1,000 pounds of force if I went all out. I was just playing the part of a 0.6 vitality student perfectly. Students, Old Chui said, his voice deep and serious. Wang Xian's progress teaches us a vital lesson. Senior year is the most critical time. It is never too late to pursue the path of martial arts. The crowd went quiet. I know some of you are just waiting for your awakening to change your fate, he continued. I won't deny that talent matters. But talent isn't the only way to change your life. Some students nodded, but most looked skeptical. They still believed in the shortcut of a lucky awakening. Teacher, Zhou Su Kuan interrupted. How did you draw that circle on the ground and deflect everything without moving? What was that? Old Chui smiled. That's footwork. Specifically, the square inch technique. It means moving within a tiny space so perfectly that even falling dust won't touch your clothes. It's a 3rd stage technique. The students' eyes lit up. It sounded legendary. Don't get ahead of yourselves, Old Chui warned. You aren't even close to that level of body control. If you want to improve, practice the plum blossom pose. Work on your reactions. Your goal right now is just a millisecond reaction time. The excitement faded. Basically, he was telling them they needed to learn to walk before they could fly. I hid a small smile. I had mastered the square inch technique back in college in my previous life. After the class ended, Old Chui pulled me aside. Wang Xian, be honest with me, he whispered. Did your martial talent awaken early on its own? Sorry to disappoint you. Teacher, I said. I don't think I've awakened anything. I understood why he asked. When a talent awakens, the hidden power usually causes a massive spike in vitality. A 0.5 could jump to a 1.0 instantly. If it happens spontaneously without external help, it usually means the person is a once-in-a-century genius. Old Chui stared at me for a long time. My vitality hadn't jumped that much, so he dropped it. Then your saber skills, where did they come from? I had my lie ready. I've been playing a lot of Martial World, no sword lately. Old Chui blinked, then laughed. The VR game? You've been practicing your blade work in a simulator. It was a government-backed game used to raise the national martial arts level. It was about 90% realistic. Even grandmasters used it for virtual duels. It wasn't the same as real life, but if you spent thousands of hours in there, it translated to the real world. Not for 2 years, I said casually. Just recently. You have incredible talent for the blade then, Old Chui said, his eyes gleaming with excitement. We have a month left. If you have questions, come to me anytime. Our class has 3 spots for the elite martial arts track. I want you to fight for one. Since you've reached the 1st stage, you're eligible to pick a foundational saber manual. Go learn it. I headed straight for the high school's martial arts library. My goal was simple. Select a 3rd-class foundational saber technique to study. Before I went in, Old Chui stopped me with a look of absolute seriousness. He warned me to choose only one technique and told me not to get greedy. He said if I could fully master a single foundational martial art within a month, my spot in the elite martial arts track would be guaranteed. I nodded in silence. In this world, anything labeled as a martial art carried lethal power. Most high schools only offered foundational levels. Above that were advanced techniques, which usually required a rank 3 martial artist to even attempt. Higher still were the superior techniques, reserved for those at rank 6. At the very top stood the national grade techniques. There were only a handful of those in the entire Dragon Kingdom. They were designed for martial gods. If you weren't a martial god, you didn't even need to think about them. Learning these arts also required a specific level of comprehension. If your blade skill was only at the first stage and you tried to learn an advanced technique, progress would be painfully slow, no matter how much of a genius you were. Even if you did manage to learn it, your vitality wouldn't be high enough to actually unleash its power. The morning ended with a single boring culture class. When the final bell rang for noon, the students swarmed out of the room toward the cafeteria like a pack of hungry wolves. Chen Yuting didn't move from her seat. She sat there quietly, watching me out of the corner of her eye. When I stood up and headed for the back door, she finally snapped. "Wang Xian, what is your problem?" she shouted, jumping to her feet. I turned my head, looking at her with genuine confusion. I admitted I was wrong, okay? She bit her lip, her eyes shimmering. "I already apologized. Can't we just move past this?" I rejected Li Zihang. I've rejected everyone. Before, when you asked to have lunch with me and I said no, it was because you already bought me breakfast. I didn't want you spending more money on me, but you always used to come and ask me anyway. Now, you don't even bother. I stared at her, stunned. I realized then just how much of a pathetic simp I must have been in my previous life. She looked fragile and hurt, the kind of delicate beauty that could melt a heart of stone. "You said it yourself," I replied casually. "You were worried about me wasting money. So I'm not wasting it." She seemed to have expected that answer. "Fine. If you ask me to lunch, I'll pay for it myself. Do you really think I'm the kind of person who only spends other people's money? Aren't you?" I asked. She stomped her foot, her face flushing with a mix of shame and anger. She looked like a pouting child. "I'll pay this time, all right." She wiped the corner of her eye and took a step toward me. "From now on, I'll pay for lunch every single day."